As far as creative professionals go, Michael certainly does fit the description. He's a record producer, co-founding Sydney's Leichhardt Studios, the home to some of Australia's great recording artists. He's produced hundreds of records, hundreds, literally hundreds. He's a multi-instrumentalist, he plays everything. He's also a solo artist. He's recorded over 30 albums, can you imagine? He's a songwriter, a co-writer, a videographer, and a graphic designer. So please help us welcome Michael Carpenter, the creative professional, to teach you how to become a creative professional. I'll be here taking your questions, so please do pop your questions in the comments section, and I'll pass them on to Michael. So I hope you enjoy this very special JMC Masterclass.
Hi there everybody, I'm Michael. Welcome to this Masterclass. This is a Masterclass that's very important to me as an experienced creative professional and as somebody who lectured here at JMC for 8 years and saw a lot of great students transition from being students into being my peers. It's something that is very, very important to me. So, so I hope that you get a lot out of it. The way we'll run things is, like Kylie said, if we've got questions as we go along, we can save them to the end, or if you've got things that need to be addressed as we're going through them, Kylie will keep an eye on the chat window as we're going through, and she can just butt in whenever it's the right moment. All right, we're going to get straight into it. The first thing, first impressions are important. So, what I want us to do, and this, when I've done this masterclass in front of an audience, this works probably better than what it is now, but the concept is the same. Just looking at what you got on the screen and what Kylie's just said there, or any other research that you may have done before the masterclass, make a mental note or write down some notes into your phone or write down some notes in your computer, your first impressions of me before we start. So as I sit here now, as I'm talking, or any research that you've got, just for the next 15, 20 seconds, just write down some thoughts. I'm not going to be asking you about them, but I want you to get a sense of your judgments that you've made on me just at the start of this. So I'll just wait for 15 or 20 seconds where I jot down a few things. It's quite nerve-wracking, Kylie. The people are writing down things about what they think about me out there on the internet. What could possibly go wrong? All right, we'll come back and talk about that a bit more later on. Who am I? Well, all my details are up there on the screen now, I think. But I'll give you a bit of a rundown on who I am. I'm 53 years old. I started playing drums and guitar when I was about 11 years old. I did my first gig when I was 15 and my first recording session when I was 16. I produced my first record, my first full album, when I was 25 years old. I've been involved in about 1,750 recording projects, including about 1,000 albums. I started lecturing at JMCAcademy while doing my master's degree in 2007. I wrote for Audio Technology magazine for over 10 years. I've been making videos now for about 8 years, and my last count was roughly up to about 175 music videos, and some corporate ones in there as well. I released my debut solo album in 1999. Including all of my side projects, I've now released over 32 albums. It was 32 at the start of the year, but there's been one that's come out since then. I roughly calculated that I've done about 3,200 gigs as a musician, as a sideman playing a variety of instruments. I also do graphic design and photography. So there's a lot to what I do as a creative professional. And it's one of the reasons why I think that I'm reasonably well qualified to come in and speak to all the different disciplines that are taught on all the campuses at JMC, just about the idea of kind of how you become a professional in the field that you're involved in. The next, yeah, my info is just up there. There's my Tumblr blog. There's a YouTube channel. There's my Facebook page, which is, my web page, which is just a holding page at the moment. There's my Facebook main music page there. And then there's my Instagram pages there as well. All right, so you can take on that, and you can stalk me however you feel like is the most appropriate for what you're doing. Here's a photo of me in my workplace. That's my studio. I've been sitting in that place, that space there, on that chair, or various iterations of that chair now, for 16 years. I'm very proud of the place that we built at Leichhardt Studios in Leichhardt here in Sydney. Me and my business partner, Matt Fell, who's probably Australia's #1 country producer, built the space. and we've had a variety of different producers come through it, but it's very much our workspace. It reflects us, and we're very, very proud of the work that we've done there. So that's what it looks like. There's a few guitars hanging on the wall, there's drum kits outside, there's a drum kit just down on the bottom right that isn't really in shot. I think actually, Kylie, you took that photo.
I probably did. We've taken many photos in that room.
That's right, that's right. Okay, we're going to talk about what we're going to do today. Okay, we've got a lot of ground to cover, so I'm going to race through a fair bit of it, but feel free to let me know when I'm going through too quickly through things. We're going to talk about public profile, show reels, social media perceptions and strategies. We're going to cover some financial basics. We're going to talk about the important thing of charging for your services. We're going to briefly touch on tax and debt commitments. Very, very important. We're going to discuss dealing with clients in a professional way. We're going to talk about how you build a client base. And finally, we're going to talk about refining our professional practices. Okay, so there's a lot of broad territory there, and we'll get into some specifics on all those things as we go through. Let's get started. Like I said, if you've got questions, either ask them as we're going through or jot them down and we'll do them at the Q&A at the end. All right. The very first thing, okay, this is a really important point to get out of the way. I imagine we're dealing with a demographic of students from all parts of their JMC studies here. Very important point that's up there on the screen now, it should be, which is stop thinking of yourself as just students. This is the beginning of your creative careers. You have access to facilities, mentors, and experiences that give you a massive head start. Start to use this time to amass experience, content, very important, content, and connections, okay? One of the common things that I see students do, and I taught students from first year all the way to the end of their degree here at JMC, was they'd wait until their last semesters to start to think about how to put themselves out into the world or how to approach the work that they were doing. The most successful students that I taught here were the ones who from semester one started to look at the work that they were doing as benchmarks, as stuff that they could use on their show reels or that they can start to approach from a professional point of view. Okay, so don't wait to start your career. You are starting your career right now. Just because you're a student doesn't mean that you can't start to put together assets and content and make connections that will fortify you as you go into the next stage of your career. So that's a very important first point. Stop thinking of yourselves as students. The next point. This was taught to me by my dad a long, long time ago, and it's something I've carried through my whole life with me. People make judgments based on whatever info they have. Okay, I'm just going to read from my screen here because there's a whole bunch I want to get through here, and I'll flick through some of the PowerPoint points as well. If you can control the way that people perceive you, you're making good impressions immediately. Be aware that before employing anyone for a service, everybody, and I mean everybody, goes and stalks potential working partners. So think about what you're posting on your Instagram and your Facebook and your TikTok now. Get your professional online presences sorted as soon as possible. Set up professional pages. Keep them separate from your personal stuff. Look back on what you have posted and see if anything will damage you. People are watching now. Think about the way you dress. Think of the assumptions you all made about me before I even started talking today. So those notes that you made about me, about what I was wearing and how I look and the cut of my beard and the hat that I was wearing and all those sort of things, they're fueling your impressions of me, your first impressions of me, and you will have judged me. That's okay. Judging isn't a bad thing. People are sizing people up as soon as they walk into a situation. They do that all the time. Who you are professionally is reflected in all the things you do from here on in. Okay, so you have crossed a threshold. As soon as you started coming to JMC, you made a commitment to your professional life. So start to have that be reflected in the way that you hold yourself, the way you present your work, the way you present the relationships that you're building, all that stuff. Start doing that now because people are judging you on it. In a good way and a bad way for those. And if you're sitting there listening to this and you're going, oh, right, there's a few things I need to attend to, then you already know what I'm talking about. Okay? For me, a few years ago, I remember there was a critical point for me, probably 10 years ago now, where I made a decision that I wouldn't wear T-shirts to work when I had a client in. It was just a thing. People were paying me whatever the amount of money per hour I was charging, I could put a shirt on. And it was just a little thing, but it ended up having a big impact on me. It started being a thing where when I'd go and do gigs, I wouldn't turn up in T-shirts. And I love T-shirts. I've got a great collection of T-shirts. But it was all about treating myself in a way that felt more professional, almost having a uniform to the way that I approach what I'm wearing to work in the mornings. And in that, I started to define and refine what I wanted, how I wanted people to perceive me. And it did make a difference in the way that, in the quality of the work that came to me and the way that I approach clients. The next thing, start to curate your professional show reels and your portfolio now. Okay? A lot of students, even in first semester, will sit there and go, I'm not doing anything that I want the world to see. That doesn't mean that you can't keep on working on those pieces that you did in semester one. As I said here, start to build real-world content right now with your assessments. Pardon me. I'll read from my notes here. In every creative discipline you're studying here, every single one, you are doing work that could potentially be used in your show reels or professional portfolios. Achieve well here, and you'll be hitting the ground running with real-world content that puts you in good stead with potential employers and clients. Tumblr blogs or web pages, set them up. YouTube show reels, Spotify playlists, SoundCloud playlists, professional Facebook and Instagram accounts that are well connected and maintained. It's an online world. Use that to your advantage. Okay? So for what I'm talking about there, you do an assessment. Say you're in the audio school and you do a mix in semester 2 and you like it and it turns out really, really well and you're really proud of it. Don't just go, okay, I did really, really well for a student. Go and put it up somewhere as an example of your work. Okay, this is the first piece of work that I'm comfortable with to show people of what I can do. Start to build that up, and as you gather your resources, as you go through your degree, and you do better and better work, that stuff can get pushed to the back a little bit more, but you are building content, okay? Even for the students who might hand in a mix, and it doesn't do too well, but they learn a lot of things from the process of handing in an assessment and then getting feedback. Maybe 6 months down the track, you go back and revisit that multi-track, refine the mix, get it to the point where you are comfortable with it, and still utilise that as part of your profile, okay? And that happens with every one of the disciplines here at JMC. If you're doing accessible work, you can utilise that as part of your professional show reel. Start to put that together now. More importantly, it gets you to start to think about that at this early stage in your careers. I didn't start thinking about having professional show reels and stuff like that until well and truly into my career. I used to make mixed CDs for people. But now, whenever anybody asks me for content, I can just bang out a bunch of links straight away. Here's a Spotify playlist. Here's a Spotify playlist for my songwriting. This one's for my producing. Here's a Tumblr blog which shows what I've been doing in the studio with photos and stuff like that. Here's a YouTube channel where you've built up content and you can go to it straight away. So start to think professionally that way with the stuff that you're doing here at JMC. Next thing, grow your brand. Okay. We all have heroes, people that we're inspired by. Don't be scared to spend time researching how your heroes are doing things. Get inspired by their professional approaches. See how they use social media. Study how they network and make things work. Imagine where you will fit within this professional world and start working towards that now with your online strategies and content. Attach quality and confidence to all that you do, even if you're faking it. So even if you don't think you know exactly what you're doing, but you're starting to see how other people are doing things, then bluff. Get yourself out there and get yourself immersed in that world. I had a student who, when I was teaching here, a really, really great student, and during the time that we were here, she disappeared for a few weeks because she'd broken a leg. And it was a bad break, and she basically spent months and months and months getting better. But by the time she came back, she had a much bigger knowledge in terms of who her peers were going to be, the people she aspired to be like, and her Instagram page had exploded because she was just putting things out there and making connections with people, and it pretty soon she became a person of authority to speak to about specific things that she had started to curate. So she'd use her time effectively and use the online world really effectively from that point of view. Okay, so there's always opportunities, but the most important thing you can continue to do, again, in whatever discipline, is go and look at your heroes. Look at what they're doing. Look at how they're using Instagram or Facebook or whatever, and go and start to see how you would fit into that world. Start to look at the strategies that they're doing and start to implement them in small ways yourself to start to build yourself into that world. But don't wait until you've been 5 years out of JMC to do it. Start doing it now, so by the time you leave here, you actually have a head of steam and have some confidence in that world. All right? Remember this, and I say this, and I will remind you of this a few times during this talk today. You're not only students, okay? Start acting like a professional now. This should be reflected in your attitude, professionalism, especially here at uni, and your work ethic, okay? There's always a mentality with students that you're only students. You may feel like you don't know what you're doing, but that mentality is going to be one of your biggest stumbling blocks. If you can start to address that now, start to deal with the mentality of, I'm not a student, I'm a young professional. You're already ahead of the game. You're already industry professionals. Start acting like it with your attitude, your professionalism, and your work ethic, okay? I see a lot of students, and especially because of the age bracket of people coming straight out of school and going straight to uni, where they think that they've got time up their sleeve so they can just deal with that last stuff later on, and they kind of take a bit of a relaxed approach to uni. I can say unequivocally, after 8 years of teaching here and a few more years teaching at the con, the most successful students are the ones who come to their assessments and come to their classes like their life depends on it. Now that might seem like it's over dramatic, and there are going to be some subjects that you may not feel as comfortable with doing that as others, but really this is the professional world. You're donating, you're putting a bunch of resources into this degree, so take it seriously. Start to approach your assessments in a professional way. And we'll talk about how to manage all that a little bit later on. But approach your classes, approach guest lectures or masterclasses when they get thrown in front of you in a professional way. Look at them and go, that would be an interesting thing. Use these resources, be committed to the idea of it, and you will reap benefits really quickly rather than waiting until the end of your degree and going, right, so what do I do now? Okay? The next thing, I want to give you 2 early shortcuts. Okay? The first one, communication. Learn to be good communicators in every way. So I'm not just talking about things. Respond to emails in a timely fashion in a professional, easy to read way. If you have a dodgy sounding email address, get a better one. And there's a whole bunch of people out there who are kind of going, yeah, right, okay, maybe the email address I'm currently using is not very professional. It's very easy to set up professional email addresses. Set up that email address with a signature file to all of your online presences. Every time I send out an email, somebody approaches me about the idea of getting work, doing an album or doing a video. The email I send back to them has got my signature file, which has got all my links, which gives people an easy way to go and look at what I've done before. It makes it really, really easy for them. It's professional. Straight away, it looks impressive. In all communications, be clear with good grammar and be thorough. So in other words, if you're asked 8 questions, don't just answer the first 2. That frustrates the hell out of people. Look at the emails and answer them clearly, succinctly. Don't write a novel for every question you're being asked. Just keep the momentum of the conversation going. Don't get sidetracked. Don't be scared to ask questions for clarity. That's one of the big things I see all the time, where I have no problems with going back and saying, I need you to clarify these few points that you mentioned last time. Or going back to people who haven't answered all the questions that I've asked them and saying, you didn't address this issue, I need answers on this before I can comment on the first 3 points. Be accessible to people and easy to work with. So this element of communication is very, very important. It makes you a better professional. Even now, just as I was talking about this, I realised that as I was pulling in here to JMC today to give a lecture, somebody had called me, and when they'd called me an hour before, I said, call me in an hour, but I was just getting out of the car and I couldn't take the call, so I have to make a note to myself to call them on the way out of here because I don't want their first impression of me to be, he told me to call him back and then he didn't take my call. This is a new client. This could be $15,000 or $20,000 worth of work, so I have to respond to him before 5 o'clock today. That's just the way it works, okay? Think of it this way. If somebody's approaching you about doing some work for them in any of the fields that you're in, and you take 2 days to respond, they probably have gone and asked 3 other people about it who maybe haven't taken 3 days to respond. So prioritise communication. The second early shortcut, find your point of difference. Everybody's got one, okay? Think about all the things that you do and all the things that you are. Value add to your services. So for example, I was always a multi-instrumentalist. When I started to learn to play drums, I was learning to play guitar at the same time. So straight away, I had value because I could do a few things. Not only that, I could talk to the guitar player in the bands that I was in about guitar parts, and when I was in a band where I was a guitar player, I could talk to the drum player about drum parts. Then I became a recording guy, so I had a bit more idea of all that. And then as things evolved, I started to have interest in other things and started to add value to my services. The majority of the work that I do comes from people booking me for one thing, and then, oh, while you're there, and we get on really well with you, Michael, why don't you do this for us? Why don't you take some photos? And while you've taken the photos, why don't you just do the single cover? Why don't you do the album cover? Why don't we do some videos? Can you write me a press release while you're here? So it's important for you to know what you can do and start to turn that into something you can charge money for, all right? The next thing. Now how I said there's shortcuts, they're kind of shortcuts, but in actual fact there's no shortcut. It's all about hard work. Hard work is a universal currency to any successful career. And I'm just going to explain that a bit. The bad news is there's no shortcut. You just have to work hard. This is a massive commitment to yourselves and your career. I hate to tell you this, but it should overtake your life. Even for me, at this advanced stage of my career, it's a constant thirst for knowledge in all the things that I do. But I love it, and it always pays off in knowledge and makes me doing my job easier. Think of it this way. However hard you think you're working, if you look around at your peers, one of you is working harder. Okay? So for me, it's constant. On any given day, if you look at my web browser on my computer, I've got 20 browsers open of all the various things I'm researching. So yesterday it was all about researching backdrops and tone boosters for a particular guitar that I need to modify, and also some marketing strategies for a new single that I've got coming out. So it's a constant sense of looking for more information and updated information too. Things are moving so quickly in our industries that it's important for us to stay on top of the way that people are consuming things. So it's a big commitment. If you're only half doing it, somebody else isn't half doing it, and they're going to get more opportunities than you. That's just the way that it works. Okay? All right. So that should have spooked you enough. Let's move on to the next category, which is money, money, money. Okay? Easily the biggest question I get asked by students, usually during the degrees here at JMC. A mate will have asked me, they said, oh, I like the mixes that you've been doing. Will you do some of my mixes for me? And they'll come to me and they'll go, how much do I charge? I don't know, should I charge anything? Should I do it for free? And it's a big problem. Okay? So we're going to talk briefly for a while here about how do you charge for your services. Okay? I've come up with a formula that I think works pretty effectively. And this is something you probably want to write down. Do something for free, but do it once. Okay? So when we started making videos, I remember I turned around to Kylie here and said, Kylie was working as an assistant for me at Leichhardt Studios, and I said, do you reckon we can make videos? People kept on asking me about how to make videos. Who have we got that we can make videos? They were asking me for recommendations, and I recommend people, but it was happening a lot. So I turned around to Kylie one day and went, do you reckon we can start making videos? And Kylie went, yeah, sure, how hard could it be? And I think...
Famous last
words. And the first video we ever made was actually for one of Kylie's songs. So we did it for free. We were just mucking around with the camera just to see how it worked out. But as soon as we got it finished, and it looked really good, it still looks really good, we started sending it out to people. Hey, we're doing this now. Are you interested? So the next time you do it again for free, but you do it in half the time. Okay, so the first time should take you a while to do anything. We'll use videos as an example. So the first video, it maybe took us, I don't know, a day to film and edit. If we were doing the next one for free, which we did, it was important that it took significantly less time. So we did it in half the time. So we refined our process, worked out what worked and what didn't work, started to fall into a little bit of a pattern, even though it was only our second video. By the third time, you charge for it. Okay? So by the time we got to the third video, I went, yeah, we can make videos, and people would say, oh, well, so what's the cost? Or what are you doing? But we didn't say we were doing it for free. We went, okay, to do a video, because we're just getting our business off the ground, let's do it for $500. And they go, great, the first two videos looked great. For $500, what have we got to lose? By the fifth time, charge double what you charge the third time. So by the time you get to the fifth video or the fifth thing that you've done, you should be not charging for free, and you should be charging a better rate for it. Okay? This is an incremental way for you to start to attach value to the work that you do. Your time is valuable, even as students. Remember, you're only students. Get out of that mentality. Start to get used to the idea of attaching value to your time. Okay? Now, that doesn't mean you have to go out and charge rates that are going to be competitive to me as a mixing person or whatever, but get yourselves into the game and get used to the idea of charging for your services. It's very, very important. When I did this masterclass here a few months ago, I got the whole crowd to chant this next thing, what I've just put up on the screen, which is, my service is worth this, and for that price I will provide. In other words, get used to that being your mantra. My service is worth this, and for that I will provide these things. Okay? If you continue to consider your service as being not worthy of anything, other people will think the same way. So even just charging an arbitrary fee just to get things going. And be careful with working with friends. Friends will take for granted the idea of, oh, I've got a mate, he's a mixing guy, he can do it for me, and he's just a student, so it'll be okay. No, charge a fee. It doesn't have to be full rate, but say, for me to do that, I'll do the first one for you for nothing, but if you like it and we do more, I've got to charge you for it, and it will be this much. And we're going to talk about that in a second. I'm going to read from my little blurb here. Even as new professionals, your time is valuable. Start getting used to charging something. If you consistently think that you're not good enough to be charging, that's how people will treat you. They will get that vibe from you and will not want to work with you. Get used to the rhythm of the saying, my service is worth this, and for that price I will provide this. Okay? It's very, very simple. You're doing something and you're quantifying what it is that you're doing for somebody, and it has value. This is the biggest problem students have transitioning out of their student mentality. They're constantly apologising for their service. The most successful students I've taught became my peers before I even stopped teaching them. I'm going to say that to you again. The most successful students that I've taught became my peers before I even stopped teaching them. So they were the ones who, when we were in the last couple of trimesters or the last couple of semesters here at JMC, they were the ones who were selling their services, which means as soon as they're doing that, they're my contemporaries and my peers. Okay? And that is the reality of it. Okay? So if there's one big lesson you take away from this today, is to start to charge for your services. Once you feel like you have a valid service, attach value to it. The next thing we're going to talk about is the idea of how you charge for your service. A lot of students don't know how to charge for a lot of professionals don't know how to charge for their services. There's usually 3 different ways you can go about it. By the hour rate, by the day rate, or the project rate. For me, I do audio work, so recording, mixing, performing, all that sort of stuff, not live performing, but studio performing. I do audio work by the hour always. I do video work as a mix of a project rate and an hourly rate depending on the project. Graphic design and photography I do by the hour, strictly. A lot of people get hooked into the whole project rate, and still a lot of my contemporaries still swear by the project rate. I'm going to talk to you about the dangers of a project rate. If you say to somebody, I'll make an album for you and it'll cost you $10,000, they will go, great. The problem with just saying that, I'll do an album and it'll cost you this much money, is how many songs? What's the production aesthetic? How built up is it going to be? How long are the songs? If it's a 16-song album, they're just going to keep on going with it. The reason I don't do hourly rates is because early on in my career I got burned by it. When people know that the reason I don't do project rates is because early on in my career I got burned by it. People would come in and know that they just had limitless time to work on this project, and I was just being paid by the hour. So, if I ever do a project rate, I have very clear guidelines. In every situation that you're in, clearly outline the boundaries of your time, especially for project rates. So even now, if I'm charging by the hour, I say to people what is to be expected. I try to be very, very fair about what I'm charging and how I'm charging it, but I make it clear. If I do a project rate for a video, I say, so for example, it'll be, for this rate, it'll be 2 locations and no travel, for example. If we have to travel travel out of town to do it, then it has to go up to the next scale. Okay, so put parameters around it. In the very, very rare case where I do an album for a project rate, I will say if we're doing 10 songs, it'll be 10 songs. It will buy you, this project rate will buy you 15 days of recording and 3 days of mixing, for example. Anything above that gets charged out at a rate that we predetermine. Okay, so put boundaries on them. Okay, it's very, very important that whatever you do, you make it very, very clear, and I stress to you, do it via email. Don't agree to things over the phone. If it's an email, you've got a paper trail where you can send it back to them at a point later on and say, this is what we agreed to. Okay? The next thing, I don't know whether many students out there have heard of what a spec deal is. I don't really do spec deals anymore, but for a long time I did spec deals, which is the idea is that you would offer people the experience of working with you for no fee. That's what it comes across as, but it's not entirely true. I think that spec work is actually very, very important for students. The whole idea of making yourself available to do work so that people are taking a punt on you, I guess. Reading through my notes here, I'll say that spec deals, though, are not free work, okay? If you do a trial for a client, you do a trial for a client, and if the client likes it and goes ahead with it, they pay the predetermined and discussed fee. So in other words, if you're an audio engineer or a video editor or a colour grader or whatever, you might approach somebody and say, hey, I do this, how would you like to just try me out for your services? And they'll go, great. And you'll go, just to be clear, I'm happy to try this out, but if you use my work, I charge this amount of money for it. Okay? Very, very important that you outline that. Okay? And they might come back and go, oh, well, I thought it was going to be just trying stuff out. Again, we refer back to the idea of you do it once, maybe for free, but by the second time you start charging them for it, and make sure that the client knows about that. Okay? The thing that clients like about this is it involves you backing yourself, which is always impressive to potential clients. Certainly, when I used to do spec work in the studio, I could say to people, why don't you just come and have a day to just see how it all works? Because I knew what it was going to be like. I knew they were going to have a great time working with me, we were going to have a great day, and we get to the end of the day and they'd go, great, let's go on with the project, at which point I would go, fantastic, I'll send you through the invoice for the work that we did today. Okay. Very important point that I'll finish off this point on spec work is, if deals do not work out, so if you're doing a job for somebody, do not hand over your work without charging for it. Okay? It's a real trap for young players where people will go, hey man, can you do a mix for me? You do it and then they go, oh, we didn't really like the mix anyway, but can you send me through a master just in case? The answer is no. If they say, oh, we want to just keep it as a reference, you'll go, okay, well, I'll charge you a fee for it. And you come up with an agreed fee. Remember, spec deals, as much as they appear like they're free work, they are not free work. Okay? Unless you're at the very, very beginning of your career where you willingly do that, as we talked about before. But yeah, the most famous story I've got about that is I had a young band from the Central Coast come in and take me up on the offer of doing spec deals. This is about 10 years ago. And we got to the end of the day and we had a great day. And the very charismatic lead singer came up to me at the end of the day and he ushered everybody else out of the room. He said, I wanted to talk to you about our day. I went, yeah, sure, it was a great day. So do you want me to send you an invoice? And he went, oh, no, we haven't got any money. I went, oh, right. And he went, but, you know, we're going to be a big band and we're on the rise, so I think this would be a really good investment for you to get in on the ground floor with us. I went, so you never really had any intention of paying me? And he went, well, no, not really. We just wanted to come and see if it was a good fit. And it was a good fit, clearly. So I reached over and I just deleted his work and told him to leave my studio. And that was the end of the story. I didn't hand over my work for free, and my work had value. So I lost a day's work, but the lesson there for him was, no, I wasn't investing in his business. So that's the kind of attitude that you have to take with the work that you do. Again, attaching value to the stuff that you're doing. A big point that we'll bring out here is that you have to believe in yourself before anyone else will. If you're not good enough, if you've got stuff that you've been doing at uni, but you're apologising for it because it's not good enough yet, whatever, work harder and get better at it. That's what we're at school to do. Okay? Go back to your lecturers and go, I almost got it right with this, but I'm not quite happy with it. How can I make it better? That's what you're here to do. The first time you do anything here in this world, you will be terrified and out of your depth. Okay? This does not mean step away from it. In fact, every time you must get the job done. Okay? You'll be thrown into situations all through your degree and all through your professional life where somebody will ask you to do something that is a bit above your skill set. Okay? You'll be terrified. I still get into those situations where people ask me to do stuff and I nervously say, yeah, sure, I'm sure I can do that. And then I go and research how to actually do the job for days on end. Actually, a great example, my night tonight, after I put my kids to bed, is I'm going to be doing a bit more of a crash course on After Effects because I need to animate a bunch of album covers for clients who are asking me to incorporate their single covers or their album covers into video teasers. Now, I've been outsourcing that work in the past, but I've decided that I'm not going to outsource it, I'm going to do it. So I've just agreed to do 3 of those that have to be turned around by next week. So every moment that I've got between now and next week, I'll be learning how to take on that skill. Am I worried that I won't be able to do it? Yes. Will I be able to do it? Yes. You just have to work harder and get it done. Okay? Which brings me to my next point. Don't be scared to do things above your skill set. Say yes to everything. This is very, very important. The reason I do so many things is because I have a long history of people asking me to do things that inside I know that I don't quite have the skill set to do, but by saying yes to it, you're setting yourself a new target, a new threshold that you have to go towards. And then you look at that, much like an assessment here at uni, and you're going to go, right, I've got 6 weeks to learn how to play piano on these 14 songs. You break it down, okay, I need to touch on it, I need to start listening to these songs at week 1, I need to start playing through them on week 2, I need to start to go into dedicated listening by dedicated playing by week 3, and then week 4, 5 and 6, I just need to be practicing the hell out of them. Okay, once you've done that, all of a sudden you're now a keyboard player. And then you do that again, and then you end up being what I'm doing here. Okay, so that's a very important point, I'm going to say it again. Don't be scared to do things above your skill set. Say yes to everything. This is important, okay? Most of the things I do, photography and graphic design, it's just because I'm a nerd who always liked looking at record covers and likes looking at rock and roll photography and likes looking at photos of his favourite artists, and then you sit there and you see patterns in terms of what looks good and what works. And then you go, I'm pretty sure I could do that. I'm just lacking the skill to do it. But I've got the eye and the idea. The skill is easy. As long as your creative mind is going, you can put the mechanics together to do pretty much anything. All right? So that's why I've ended up where I am now, which is by saying yes to things that are above my skill set level. All right? I'm going to have a quick drink. Is there any questions coming yet, Kylie?
We do, actually. Sue-Ann has said, I agree. Say yes to everything. Yes. And remarkably, I learned how to do it in the time required. That's a very good point.
It is a really important point. And I think that embracing, especially because we're talking broadly about creatives, the idea of I'm a record producer, but I'm a mixing guy, but I also have an interest in photos, photography. Grow that. You know, start to go, well, what do I need to become a photographer? I mean, the first camera that we bought to start making videos was just a second-hand Canon camera that I think we paid $400 for, with stock lens, and we just got really lucky in the fact that they were a good combination of things to start with. And then from there, I've now spent $50,000 on cameras and lenses, 8 years down the track. So you don't need a lot to get started, but it's all about growing the creative mind, and more importantly, looking at the courage that we all have within us and saying, yes, I'm going to do it. I'm going to dedicate myself to that, and then working hard to do it. It's a combination of courage, faith, creativity, and then hard work. It's basically going to be the same thing you're going to carry through your whole career. If you students at this point of your career can be using that as your new baseline point, your career can go in a million different ways, I promise you. So yes, say yes to everything. All right, the next question, start to get onto the businessy things, is when do I set up a business? It's another really important question that students ask me. I'm going to read my notes first, and I'm going to bring up some more of the PowerPoint things as we go through.
Can I interrupt you with another just because I think this is a really good question Jackson has asked. Do you have any thoughts on professional mentors beyond uni?
Oh, look, I think that in terms of mentorships, I don't think that it's, there's no school kind of thing where you can, school of people who will mentor. I mean, there's internships, if you're lucky enough to find them. I think one of the great things about this time, and we'll talk about this a bit later on, is there's a lot of transparency out there in terms of how people are doing things that you want to do. So I think that the smart students will be the ones who will start to read between the lines of seeing how people use their social media and use their timing with things, and start to follow the patterns of how their heroes do things. I think in terms of professional mentorships, the disciplines are relatively different, but the processes are reasonably the same. And one of the things that I found interesting going between the audio world and the video world and the graphic design world is the concepts are very much the same. Somebody has an idea, they require a service, they're looking for a professional who can find out what their endpoint is supposed to be, and they're just trying to find the right person to work with to get to that point. So I don't know of any dedicated mentorship sort of thing, but I think that if you're clever enough and you start to track how some of your heroes have developed and you see the patterns that they do, and that this all does still is relevant for business students too, people who are looking into getting into management and stuff like that. Apart from that, don't be scared to go and approach some of your heroes, if they're in this country, about intern work.
Yeah, I find people are very willing to mentor you. As Michael, you're one of my mentors. You've been a great mentor for a decade now.
Yeah, I think so.
And I found you at uni. Michael was my uni lecturer. So don't be afraid to speak to your lecturers and make those connections, because we're all very willing to mentor you well beyond uni.
That's very true.
Those relationships are so valuable. Now we're best friends and we work together on many, many different projects. So I think there's a lot of value in mentorship. I'm not sure about the professional mentorship, whether that's a thing, but as you said, it's...
I do want to touch on that. I think I look at this again later on in the lecture, but I will say one thing. I mean, I've probably had, over the last 15 years, I reckon I've probably had 50 or 60 interns. So students or professionals will just come, or young professionals will come in and spend time at my studio. Some stay for 2 sessions and some stay for 3 months, or some stay for 10 years. And I do want to talk about the way to approach that. I've got a system in place where I get a lot of emails from students, students saying, hey, I'm just in my third year at JMC or second year at JMC or whatever, and I've got these credentials and I'm looking for an internship. Most of the time I just delete those emails. The ones that get through to me are the ones who said, hey Michael, I've been a fan of what you're doing, because everybody likes compliments. I've been following what you're doing at Leichhardt Studios, and I really feel like there's something special about what you do. I'm this person. I was wondering whether you had an internship program going through there. So flatter them, but don't send out just a form email to 100 people in your field. It never ends well. No producer or filmmaker or anybody or management person likes to get a form email. At least do a bit of research on the person that you're approaching. Then I will respond to that person and say, I'm not looking to take on internships at the moment, but contact me again in a month's time. So if I send 10 of those emails back a year, I get no responses back in a month. I said, contact me in a month and we'll talk about it from there. And most of the time people don't contact me. They take that as a rejection, but it's not. It's me just saying, I want to see how dedicated you are to this. And if it was important, you would take that and you put it in your phone and say, email back Michael in a month's time. The students that do, I say, I'm not taking an intern at the moment. Contact me next week when I've got more going on and we'll organise the time. So there's a weeding out process because I want to see how dedicated you are to it. This is my life, and if I'm going to be having you sitting next to me for 3 hours a day or 4 hours a day or 6 hours a day or 8 hours a day, I want to know that you're as into it as I am. So, and most of the time, like arbitrarily, if I get 30 emails a year from people, which is probably about true, about the right amount, I might get one that makes it through to that final thing just because they didn't hang in there with it. So be persistent. You know, if it means that much to you to connect with a person, don't badger them and don't get them to block you on Facebook and stuff like that. But be respectful and grateful for their time, but be persistent. If you keep on coming up, remember, after I've deleted that email the first time, when you message me back again in 6 months' time and say, I emailed you 6 months ago, I'm not going to remember it. Because that whole interaction of me reading your email and then deleting it took 5 seconds. Sorry, that seems callous, but that's just the way that it works. So be persistent, be respectful, and eventually you will rise to the top. If you're out of sight, people aren't thinking about you. So if you keep on presenting yourself, meanwhile, you're updating your profile, updating your show reel, getting more content onto your Tumblr blogs, have a Spotify playlist of the stuff that you've worked on, all that sort of stuff that makes you a more attractive candidate. Maybe you're value adding your service. I always look and see if a student, and we've had a long history of people who've come into my studio and they've sat there in the chair and they just want to get onto the tools. The best ones are the ones who have just sat and waited their turn and let me guide them into that place. But I have a lot of interns who come in and they spend 2 or 3 weeks with me and they get frustrated because they haven't been able to start to run sessions yet. There's a process and my time's valuable, so you just have to work your way into it. But be persistent. Is there any other questions there?
There's one question, one more question. It's really, really good. What advice would you have for women in the industry? Is it harder to get work? Is it harder to get work for women in the industry? What advice do you have, Michael?
You know, it's funny because Kylie and I have a long history of stories about this, about people dismissing. Kylie's a very, very talented engineer, a great, great singer, and has been an amazing assistant. I can't really afford her now. She's got a real job. But there have been times when people have come in and they've dismissed her just because she's a woman, and I don't accept that. I don't like it. But I'm not going to lie to you, it is difficult, in the audio industry at least, but I think in general it's a little bit more difficult. But the tide is turning, my friends, and certainly professionals, even of my vintage, are very, very pro the equal. I don't look at women as being lesser in any way in terms of my fields, and some of the producers I admire the most are female. I don't really I don't think of it that way. I've had a really good balance of female and male interns. And I think that ultimately anybody in these days, anybody that's really aware of trying to get the best result for their job will look at people's skill set rather than their gender. I know that other people would probably have a different point of view on that. I know that Kylie and I have spent many, many hours talking about this very, very thing. And like I said, we have some stories that unfortunately in the past of how people have dismissed Kylie. So I'm not going to lie, I think that it is more difficult for women, but just because traditionally it has been, I don't think it should be, and I do feel like every creative world is changing in that regard, and I support that idea.
I have to say though, of those occasions, no one who's been a professional, a proper professional in the industry who I respect has ever treated me any less than anybody else for my gender. It's never that. It's never the professionals who've done that. I've worked with a lot of men, a lot of very high profile producers, and no one's ever treated me like I was less than a peer to them. Yeah. On the odd occasion that it does happen, it's usually someone with an ego and someone I don't really like anyway. Yeah. So who cares? Yeah. But
I think it'd be naive to just blanket say no, it's not more difficult for women. I think that without turning this into a big social climate discussion, I think that there is a predisposition for this to be a male-dominated, for all these disciplines to be a male-dominated industry. I will say this, in my time as a university lecturer, and I've been lecturing now in various places for 13 years, sorry boys, the best students I've ever had have been women. And it's just the way that it is. You know, it includes Kylie, but it's other students who have come through who have just been more dedicated now. And I don't know whether it's just because they feel like they've had a point to prove because of their gender, or whether they're just harder workers or more dedicated, or I don't know. But the quality of the work, there's been excellent male students as well. I'm not saying that there's only been great female students. But certainly if I looked at it, I reckon it's probably a 60-40 ratio of high quality female students to male students, I think.
When I was a student, and this is going back a long time ago, so it's not certainly a current view that any female should have, I felt personally like I had to work twice as hard to be taken just as seriously as the boys. However, that was not true. That was actually just my own insecurity based on my own experiences and probably experiences of everyone that I felt came before me. Yeah. It wasn't an accurate view of the world that I had, and it certainly wasn't the experience that I had when I left and went into your studio, Michael. Mm-hmm. Absolutely not. Yeah. Or any professional studio I've stepped foot in. So that's something good, I think. Yeah. Positive.
And look, undeniably, as somebody who's now been playing gigs for 38 years, I certainly applaud the change over the last 15 years of there being more female musicians that I would call on for gigs. People that we've used before, female drummers, female bass players and singers, and one of our best friends is a piano player that is as good as any rock and roll piano player that you're going to ever come across. And I'm all for that. From my point of view as a business owner, if somebody sends me through a CV and it's professional, and I go and check out the work that's attached to it, and it's good and it's quality, the gender has no impact on me at all. And I think that that's going to be the way forward for it. So it just comes back. So with that in mind, to answer your question, I would prefer to just go, no, it's about the quality of your work, so I want to see you work harder. And certainly from my point of view, as from a personal point of view, as Kylie is one of my best friends, I've certainly been happy to see the way that she's navigated the last 10 years or so since you've been out at JMC, and that includes going from being a student to being an engineer, a great assistant, a diligent partner with us there at Leichhardt Studios, and then becoming a songwriter and an artist so we're working on our fourth record together now over a 10-year period as well.
Oh, help me.
But it's certainly somebody who's taken the experience of being a professional and gone from strength to strength with it. And I think that's, for me, that's a good indication of what can be done with dedication and hard work, and that's got nothing to do with gender. It's more got to do with work ethic than anything else, I think. Is there any more questions there, or should I carry on?
There is a couple.
Let's do it.
Mark talks about the value each brings. This was Tim Burton's approach, which is good.
Yep.
That's from Sue-Ann.
Yep.
Do you have any advice to deal with the royalty and copyright stuff to get the right benefits ratio?
We will talk about that a little bit more. Probably want to get back to get on with the businessy things in general. I will make a general thing of just saying now that every bit of work has ownership. So for keeping it from a studio point of view, if somebody pays me to do my service at the studio, like play all the instruments on their record, but they've paid me for it, every session I should be signing a release form to say I don't have any further claim on it, because they own it. They own the multi-track. They own the performances. They've paid me for my performance. I can't come back if they have a hit record and say, you used my playing and so I want part of the profits. No, you've been paid for a service. Referring to copyright and stuff like that, it goes for, I mean, I've got a publishing deal, and so I'm a songwriter. I write a lot of songs. Most of them are co-writes, and at the end of every co-write session, we sit there and we go, that's a 50-50, or it was 60-40, or if they've brought in a song for me to finish off, maybe it's 70% their way and 30% that way, and it gets registered that way, and it's simple. So I think that this probably isn't answering the question specifically, but that probably will go a little bit outside the realm of what we need to deal with today. But I think that if you look at your work, look at the work having a value, and then somebody pays for a service for it, that's a reasonably simple way of looking at it. If you own your song and somebody else uses it, then you're being paid for it, either for the song or for the master rights usage, for example. So if me and Kylie have written a song, our new single that comes out at some point in the next couple of months, and somebody wants to use it in a TV commercial and they want to use our recording, we need to be paid for the usage of the song and the usage of the recording. And you guys who are out there in the business school of JMC will be covering this in a lot more specific way. But in a basic kind of way, all through your industry, there will be a service, and at the end of it, there will be a result, and somebody who will have paid for the service will own the result. Does that make sense? Does it make sense? And certainly we can look at some more questions on that in a second, but unless there's another question, I'm going to keep on going.
No, you can
There
keep
isn't?
going.
Okay, so the big question that was coming up next, if we go to the slide, there it is up there. When do I set up a business? Big question. So I'm going to read through my blurb here. No one knows exactly the right time to do this. A general rule is if you're spending money that can be claimed as a tax deduction on something you're going to be charging money for, it's probably time to set up a basic sole trader business. Even if you run at a loss for a while, you'll get used to the rhythm of how that works. You'll get used to compartmentalising your spending between business and personal spending. Maybe even setting up separate bank accounts to give you a clear outline of where the money comes and goes from. I encourage everyone to start thinking about this now. Having clarity between your business and personal income and spending is very important and an extremely difficult thing to learn. When I say it's an extremely difficult thing to learn, I'm 53 years old, and it's only been in the last probably 5 years that I've really got my head around personal spending versus business spending. So, for example, on my fancy Apple Watch thing, I've got my cards, and when I go to buy Kylie lunch before, I went, this is a business meeting. I can buy her a hot dog on my business account and use that as something that can be claimed. Legitimately, it was a business meeting. We sat there and we talked about business related to our band. And we talked a bit about business related to this. But if I'm taking my kids to the movies, that's a grey area because their ticket is recreational, but my ticket is technically business. Start to get yourself into the mindset of this is for business and this is for personal. And the best way to do it is to just have a business account set up, not necessarily a special business account or anything like that, but just have a separate account with separate cards, and anytime you're going to get a subscription for something that you're going to use from a business point of view, that's the tax deduction. But every time you're going to go and buy a bag of chips from the shops, you cannot claim that as a business expense. So pay for it with your personal account.
What if we eat them in the studio?
No.
Oh.
No, I've tried. My accountant says, no, Michael, you can't claim that. But it is that whole thing of compartmentalising the two parts of your life. Even for me, I pay myself money into personal spending accounts. So it's not considered a wage because I'm only a sole trader. But there's money that goes into personal accounts so that I know that I've got some spending money for when I do want to go and buy a packet of chips that can't be claimed as a business expense. So yes, like I said, if you're spending money to earn money, then that's a basic business structure. So if I'm going to buy a hard drive for my computer to do work on that I'm going to be charging somebody for, that's a business expense. Okay? Think of it in that simple kind of way, and it generally will work out that way. Now, as a new business, expect to run at a loss for a while. The government expects that from all new businesses, and it's basically a grace period of startup. You know, they would love everybody to go into business and start making $1 gazillion every year. The reality of it is that you're not going to. You're probably going to run at a bit of a loss for a while, especially as students, while you're getting yourself off the ground. And you will want to spend money on equipment and advertising and maybe a website and stuff like that. So you will need startup costs. Every business has startup costs that get worn down or worked out over the first couple of years of operating. Certainly over the course of my business, I went from investing a lot of money to starting to make some money and then reinvesting, and then it's been like that for the whole time. And that's expected, okay? Like I said, separate business spending from personal spending. Very important, but it's not always an easy thing to do, okay? We're going to talk briefly about income tax, GST, and pay-as-you-go. Okay, these are things that generally people are kind of like, oh, we're audio students or we're animation students. We didn't know we were going to be talking about income tax and GST and pay-as-you-go. But a lot of people, you know, the age of students haven't really got a basic idea of it. But so I want to talk to you about it in a very, very basic way. Welcome to the tax system, professionals. As a self-employed business owner, you must be aware of your tax commitments. Okay, you must be. This is one of the big, big traps for young players. They charge, well, arbitrarily, to make it easy to carve it up, $100 for a job, and they think, awesome, I did that job and I earned $100. No, you didn't. GST, you may not charge GST, but you certainly can claim GST. The GST system is a really tricky thing that you don't charge GST technically until you're above a certain threshold, but every time you go and buy something, you're charged GST. So you have a plus and minus GST thing going on. So I think the threshold is $50,000 gross a year before you have to go into the GST system. I kind of encourage people to go into the GST system as soon as they're starting to make money. So you charge that and you can claim back your GST credits. So arbitrarily, if you've charged $100 for something and you're in the GST system, that $100 that you thought was yours is actually only $90. Then there's income tax, okay? Now, if you've worked for somebody else, they've probably paid the tax for you. So, sorry, if you're working a job and you've got a boss, they're paying the tax for you. If you're self-employed and you're the boss, you're responsible for your income tax commitment. And arbitrarily, we'll say it's going to be between 20 and 30%. So of that $90 that's left, it's now only $60 because 30% of it needs to go off into the tax man. Not straight away, but certainly at the end of the financial year. Then, if you make a profit, you have to pay tax on the year that you've had, got it? But also pay next year's tax in advance. Okay, you go into the pay-as-you-go system. Seems really complicated. It actually isn't, okay? In the fact that, so technically speaking, you wouldn't necessarily do this, but I'm putting it in this way. Your $100, $10 of it goes off to your GST account, $20 or $25 goes off into your income tax account, and you're left with the rest of it to pay your expenses. That's as simple as it gets. Then at the end of the year, when you do your tax, every 3 months you'll do your BAS, and that money that's in your BAS account, your GST account, goes off to the taxman that way. And then when you've done your tax at the end of the year, the tax that you have to pay the taxman will go out there, and it's really easy. Except nobody has accounts set up like that, especially as novices. It took me a long time to get my head around that. So every year it'd come to tax time, and I'd have to pay, if I've had a good year, I'd have to find the money to pay my tax bill. Get on top of that as early as you can, at least understanding the idea of it. What happens with that, as it says up there on the screen, these all affect your cash flow, the money that comes in and out of your business. Managing your cash flow is the single biggest issue for small businesses. So again, you do a big chunk of work. Somebody does an album with you over a month period and you go, man, $15,000, I'm rolling in it. No, 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 no. $1,500 of that goes straight to your GST account, and probably 3,000 or 4,000 of that you're going to have to be aware of with your tax commitments at the end of the year. Be smart about that now. Get it in your head. Don't just go, $15,000, I'm going to go and buy a new camera, new computer, and go on a holiday. Because when it gets around to July 1st, well, not July 1st, but when you finally do your tax, you're going to have to pay your tax commitments. So this isn't to scare you, but it's just to give you a basic knowledge of it so that you are aware that when you're setting up a business, that your money isn't all yours, if that makes sense. There's usually a question on the back of that. Has anybody asked anything about that, or are they all too scared now?
I think they left when you said tax.
I don't blame them.
But there is a question.
Yeah.
There's a question from Ryan. He says, how do you typically outreach to customers in the new market? For me, at least, I don't have a particularly large portfolio. So how might I go about finding the first customer?
Ryan, it's coming up in about 15 minutes. I've got slides dedicated to it.
He also says, thank you for the masterclass, by the way.
Well, thank you for paying attention. I hope you can hang in for about the next 15 to 20 minutes because we are going to talk about new clients. There's a real skill to it. But before we get to that good stuff, we have to talk about debt. Again, I'll be...
Come on, man.
Sorry. There is fun stuff coming up, I promise. Just a word of warning. Be very careful with debt. Tread very, very carefully when offered personal debt against your business. Unfortunately, I'm telling you these stories as words of warning because I've been through it and I'm only just after this long period recovering from that. It's an easy trap. We all go through times when we need to spend money. It's understandable when we're setting up a business. A simple rule, if you write this down and you live by this, if you don't think you can pay off the debt in a timely fashion, you don't need to buy that thing that you want now. Okay? We have this thing of want and need. I see it with students all the time. What do I need to buy to make my work better? Is it this camera or this? So they take on debt way above their station. Okay? If you're looking to take on a business loan, make sure you do careful projections based on realistic projections of what you're going to earn. If you find yourself in the situation where you've overborrowed and you're not earning enough to cover your loans, it becomes an almost impossible cycle to get out of. So, start to question your money on things. So I'm going to just read through those notes again. Like I said, do not take on personal debt against your business. It's an easy trap. So if you do need to buy something on a credit card, like a personal credit card, make sure you've got a structure in place to pay it off in a timely fashion. Okay, don't just go, I'm going to finance the startup of my business on a credit card. That's dangerous and you will get stuck. I'm not even saying you might get stuck, you will get stuck. Okay? Don't borrow money for things you can't pay back realistically in a structured way. So, project forward. You go, okay, if I want to buy a Canon EOS R mirrorless camera to start to make my own videos, and a lens that's going to cost me $3,500, which means if I want to pay that back over a 12-month period, I'm going to have to earn $80 a week or whatever it is. I'm just speculating, my maths isn't so good. But break that down and then look at it and see whether it's affordable. If it's not affordable, don't buy the thing. Okay? or project forward in terms of what extra work you can do to buy the thing. And then as soon as you get the thing, learn the thing and put it to work, okay? What that also means is you have to research and make sure that you're buying the right thing. Don't spend good money after bad, or bad money after good, whatever it is. Make careful worst-case scenario projections before you take on debt, okay? So what that means is, rather than going, I've had a good first half of the year, I'm going to continue to have a good rest of the year, so I'm going to go and spend all this money on stuff. That's not careful enough. Be realistic. Go, well, okay, well, I'll be able to pay this thing back if I had have a rough second half of the year. Imagine people who thought they were going to have a good start of the year in January this year. You know, that's how quickly it can turn. So plan around, obviously don't plan around the coronavirus, but plan around worst scenarios and the manageability of it. Over-borrowing can put you in an almost impossible cycle, like I said. The most important point to take away from this is learn quickly to question your need to spend money. So even me, you saw the picture of my room, I've got a lot of gear, but I've got a really strict, if I'm going to buy anything new now, something else has to go. It's really strict. So for example, I've got lust for a new pair of hi-hats, my dream pair of hi-hats. I know what they are, I know how to get them, I know how much they cost. So I'm on a selling spree at the moment. I just sold a pair of hi-hats that I've got in the car ready to post off. I've got another thing for sale and another thing for sale. And if I sell those things, I can afford to buy something new. Until that point, I do not need them. Okay, I want them, but I don't need them. I've got a pair of hi-hats I can already use that already sound fine. Okay? So start to get your head around this want and need thing. I certainly spent a lot of money on things that ultimately I didn't really need. I went through the experience of having them, then went, I can probably do my job without this thing, and then let it go. And then went and bought 5 guitars. Anyway, that's another point. Okay, so start to get your head around that concept as well. Further to that point, accounting. Again, this all seems like it's art. You sit there going, I thought this was going to be about becoming a professional creative, Kylie. Why are we talking about accounting? Trust me. It's very important to get your head around the basics of this. Look into and learn one of the good online accounting software packages. It will help you learn to structure your business versus personal spending. On my phone, I use Xero. It comes up straight away. I do all my invoices basically from my phone, but I can access Xero on my phone and on a computer. It costs me money. I think it's $50 a month, but that's a tax deduction. It's an expense too, but it means that my accounting is well organised. Whenever I have to spit out my BAS statement at the end of every 3 months, I just hit a button and it's done. And it means that every year I can look at my profit and loss and see where I'm making money, where I'm losing money, the things that I need to tighten up or the things I don't need to tighten up. So being able to track how your business is going is really important, especially when you do a variety of different things like I do. So it's a good investment in your business to start to get your head around the concept of invoicing and having a good accounting program. Okay? Yes, having this, it will give you a real-time analysis of the areas of your business that are making money and those that are costing money. So every once in a while, I will go and look at my profit and loss and kind of go, I should really stop doing that thing because it's costing me money and do more of this thing because it's making me money. And then I change the way that I perceive my business just by looking at the figures. Okay, growing your business carefully. Is there any questions before we go on?
No, continue.
No? Okay. Take a measured approach to spending money to expand your business, okay? We all want to spend a lot of money just going, I want to buy gear. If I have enough gear, I'll be fine, I'll be legitimate. We all have this insecurity that if we're not singing into a proper microphone or we haven't got the best lens or whatever, that's why our business is failing. It's not. It's got to do with us. So take a measured approach to spending money to expand your business. Fortunately, there's never been a better time to do a lot of good work with very little equipment. So for example, I have a video shoot this Saturday. To take that video from the beginning to the end, and not every job is like this, but this is a good example. I'm taking one tripod, a slider, one camera, one lens, one memory card, and about 3 batteries. And I'll be editing it on this computer and an external hard drive. So that's still, you know, $8,000–$10,000 worth of equipment, but I could make most of my videos with that. By the same token, in the recording studio, most of the times I'm working on the same computer, a pair of speakers, an interface, one preamp, one compressor, and a few microphones. Okay, so you don't need a lot to get going with things. But certainly when I was a student, not a student, when I was new to the whole thing of being a record producer, I felt like I needed to try every microphone and that my records would be better if I had a vintage Neumann U47. And so I hired one in one day and it was amazing. But it didn't make the person who was singing behind it, who wasn't very good, better. You know, whereas I've had amazing singers on very, very cheap microphones, and guess what? They still sound amazing. Okay? So don't get into the trap of thinking that if you have better gear, you're going to instantly be better. It makes things easier, undeniably. I've got really, really beautiful gear, and my job is very, very easy because of it. But still, the best asset that you've got is here, and your hands, and your creativity. So grow that before the idea of going and spending a whole bunch of money to make you feel less insecure about your place in the world. Hopefully that isn't said with disrespect, all right? Spend money well on proven industry standard staples, even if they're more expensive initially. Man, as an audio lecturer here at JMC, students would come to me all the time and say, I need a cheap preamp and a cheap compressor. And I go, I'll give you a tip. Don't buy a cheap preamp and a cheap compressor. Save your money, buy a good thing, and then don't think about it again, ever. Today at the studio, I did some overdubs before I came in here to do this. And they went in through a particular preamp into a particular compressor. And even with the microphone that I was using, actually, were all things that I bought in about 1999. Now, I've got lots of preamps. I've got some Neve things, and I've got some fancy things, and I've got distressors, and I've got some really great stuff. But essentially, I'm still plugging into the same thing as I plugged into way back then because I knew it was an industry standard, proven, I knew what it sounded like, and it worked. So rather than just buying intermediate, I'm not saying that intermediate stuff isn't going to be good. I've got plenty of intermediate stuff that I still use. But if you're serious about it and you want to go forward with this as a career thing, buy good stuff and then stop worrying about it. So grow your business carefully, okay? That doesn't mean you shouldn't have stepping stones and stuff like that. Otherwise, I wouldn't be selling the pair of hi-hats I'm selling now to buy new ones. But you know what I mean. Just grow carefully, and you will start to see in all of your industries numbers that come up of gear that just works, okay? So certainly do your research. Again, for me, research is the thing I'm doing all the time about stuff that works. Once again, we come back to this point of learning about want versus need. Man, I want a million things. Still, I've got a million things, and I still want a million more things. The reality of it is, to do most of the jobs that I need, that I'm doing, I don't need very much, okay? So start to get your head around that. That's a very important point in terms of managing your transition into being a creative professional. Any questions?
Chris Pickering says, this is all very good advice, everyone. And he's
there you go. Thanks, Chris. Next thing, now we start to get into some really murky waters. Cash flow, art versus commerce. All right. I hated typing this next thing. No one I know can survive just doing the creative thing that they want to do. I'm really sorry to say that to you students out there. I reckon the question that I get asked most by clients in the studio who see the world that I operate in is, how do I do music for a living full time? Or how do I do video making for a living full time? And my answer, and they don't like my answer, but my answer is don't. Do something else as well. And over the course of your careers, you will have an ebb and flow of times when you can really dedicate yourself to the main thing, and then times when you build up enough of a stockpile of resources, money, that you can go, you know what, I don't really like this job that I'm doing. I really want to get back to being a songwriter or a filmmaker or a screenwriter or manage bands or whatever. and then you come back and you do that for a while until you run out of money, and then you realise you have to supplement in some way. I love all of my creative world. I love being a photographer, I love being a video maker, I love being a songwriter, I love being a recording studio person. If I had to choose one of them, I'd be in the studio all day, every day. I love it there. But unfortunately, there are times when work hasn't been that big. Certainly during the coronavirus time, the thing that's kept my studio afloat has been video making. You know, the fact that I had that extra string on my bow, and people go, yeah, but it's still the same thing. It's like, no, well, I really want to just be doing the record making, so video making is kind of a side job for me that's helping me keep my real business afloat. It just happens to be that my side job is a lot of fun as well. So don't be too hard on yourselves about the idea of having to do things to keep your creative world afloat. Everybody has to do it. You know, the reason that I started lecturing at JMC, which I love doing, was to make sure that I could afford to keep on doing the recording studio thing. And it was an incredible time for me to go through. And the only reason I stopped doing it initially was because my video business was starting to take off. So I thought I'd take a break from teaching to grow that a little bit more. So you've always got a few streams going on. So as I said here, the balance between the things that we love and the things that we have to do changes constantly. Be aware of that going into it, and you will have a much happier life. Don't feel like every time that you have to go and do a job that you hate, you're betraying your true self. It's okay. There are going to be times when you're not going to do any of that stuff because the job that you like to do will be plentiful. There are other times when there'll be no work in your chosen field, so you're going to have to go and do something else for a while. And that's okay. Don't think in definitives. Sometimes you have to do something else for a little while to buy time or resources. That's just the reality of it, okay? So another big lesson for you to take away from today is to not feel bad if you have to come and work a real job to support your creative habit. If you're dedicated, but in fact, the way I've always looked at it is if I buy myself the time of doing a real job, then I can dedicate myself more to this other life. And usually the turnaround time between doing the thing that I want to do less and the thing I want to do is reasonably small. And it gets to the point where you do more things that you like to do and the balance changes constantly. All right? Which brings me to my next point, diversifying. Okay? I'll read from my notes. Think about your other interests in your creative world. All the things that I do came about because I was interested in them. Then I just said, how hard could it be to do that other thing? So I started doing them. First I did them for free, then charging a little, then just being something else I do. And having a varied skill set backed by experience has mostly indemnified me from running out of money, mostly. Like I said, in the first week when the coronavirus hit, I lost $28,000 worth of work in 3 days. And I went into the same panic as everybody else. But very, very slowly, I put it out there in the world that I was available still to do bits of work in isolation and stuff like that. And it was mostly video work, photography, graphic design stuff, and bits and pieces of recording that got me through it. So me having diversity has meant that I stayed afloat at probably the most challenging time of my career. Not only that, it's fun, and it's kept my creative brain ticking over. And each new discipline teaches me something in general that makes me better at my other disciplines. So just because I'm learning to be a better video maker, I somehow end up being a better record producer and managing projects better. So it all feeds into it. This is all just creativity, and it's keeping my creative brain ticking over. So, like I said, look at the other things that you're interested in. And see if there's a way that you can link them up to your creative world, or start to just do a bit of work and learning how they work better to add to your skill set. Not only that, if you happen to be a great photographer or a video person or an editor or a grader or a web person or whatever, and you're also an audio student and you send me a letter at some point saying, do you have any internships? And you say, I really love your work, Michael. I love the stuff that you've done. I love that masterclass. I also do these other things. You're essentially queue jumping. So it's not a shortcut, but I sit there and go, well, that's an appealing person to have involved because they can do things that I can't necessarily do. Okay? So think of diversity that way, if that makes sense. Anything? No? All right. Next thing. Ryan, I think we're up to the point where we get into the good stuff for you. You're in business. How do you stay that way? Oh. It's an interesting question during the coronavirus times, I tell you. So finding a client base. When I'm busy, I always see a drop in work a few months later. You have to constantly go and seek out work. Alert people through your socials of what you've done. Be present, always. People forget very, very quickly that you're there. Go out and see and meet other creatives. Collaborate. Network. Get all your content ready and get it out in the world. Working for you. I promise you won't always get the gig, but if you're persistent, opportunities will come. Remember to be ready when the opportunities come. If you're not ready, they will move on to the next person. So here's a hypothetical for you. Imagine there'll be a time in the near future when we go and see bands again, okay? And we go and see a band, and I'm a mixing person. And there's another mixing person there as well. I go up to the band afterwards and go, hey man, I really love your set today. I'm going to go and check out what you're doing. I'm a budding record producer. I'd love to do some work at some point. And they'll go, hey man, that's great. Can you send us through some stuff to listen to? And you'll go, oh, well, I'm just a student and I haven't got anything I'm really ready for yet. The other guy goes, I'm just a student at the moment, but here's my email address. I'll put it in your phone or I'll send you a message, whatever. And when I send you an email later on today, I'll have a bunch of links for you to go and look at. Who's the one that's going to be most likely to get the job? The person who's ready and put themselves out there. You won't always get the job. It just doesn't work that way. But be ready. Be ready to compete. Be ready to have your stuff ready to go. And don't be scared, especially you youngsters with nothing to lose. Go out and approach people about collaborating. You're in JMCAcademy where there are a bunch of different schools. If you're an audio person, just down the hall, there are a whole bunch of songwriters and musicians. Go and network with them. You know, I know that there is a thing where we keep our schools separate in some way, but don't. Just let people know that you're available. Get your online stuff together and start to hunt things down. And offer to do the first thing for free. Okay? Don't be scared to do it. It's experience. If somebody says to you, yeah, man, we did some recording at home, but with mixes aren't sounding very good, would you like to have a go at them? And you do it, and even if they don't use it, it becomes part of your experience set and something you can probably put on your CV or on your show reel. Okay? The most important point of all that is opportunities will come, but don't wait until they do to get ready, because they will pass you by. Is there a question?
There is. You know that look on my face, don't you?
Yeah, I do.
When there's a question. What would you say is the best form of advertisement when trying to seek clients or work?
Look, I think that having done it, I think that the fact that you've got something that's out there and exists in the real world, that's a very good question. And I think the idea behind that is look at the currency of how people consume, for example, music or film or whatever. So if it's video and you want to impress people, just send them a YouTube link, because then you're in the playing field. Now, if you can get an artist that you've worked with to have something up on Spotify as opposed to just being, nothing wrong with SoundCloud, but legitimate releases, people go, oh, you've already worked on something that's been released. Oh, that's impressive. So you're at that level. There's the perception. Again, go back to the very first thing that we talked about at the start of the conversation. People make judgments based on whatever information they've got. If one student sends through a SoundCloud for an unreleased thing, but the other one sends through a Spotify link or a YouTube video to something that's got a video and has been released, even if it's just got a few views, that's the currency with how people consume things. So, again, the idea of collaborating in a school like this where you've got an artist, somebody who might be a songwriter, but needs a producer to work with, and then somebody to make a video, everybody's benefiting from that situation. You know, even if it's not here, even if you've got collaborate in that way outside of JMC. But I think look at the way that you consume music. Again, we go back to your favourite content. I've got to stop thinking just music. Think about the schools. Think about what your heroes are doing and where they're playing, and think about what looks legitimate from your point of view. Become part of that story. Not one day I'm going to get into that story. Become part of that story, and people will assume that you're legitimate. It's that simple. You know, it's a question that I get asked all the time when people go, can I have a listen to what you've done? And then I send them through my very, very, very big Spotify playlist of just the best stuff I produce. And then they start to see names of things that have had success. All of a sudden I'm legitimate without them even listening to the playlist. So get into the game. I guess it comes back to the original point that I made. Don't consider yourself students who are going to one day be professionals. Start being that professional now and start to build stuff up. I mean, at the conservatorium where I'm doing some lecturing, there are students who are just remixers. And they're really good remixers. And so they go and approach artists, can I do a remix? And they will put it out independently or as a collaboration with the artist, but it gives them legitimacy. Now, they've taken the leap. They've put the money where their mouth is and put it out there in the world. So rather than just sending through a Dropbox link, they're sending through a Spotify link, and people go, oh, you're doing remixes for people now. Perception is everything. They've made a judgment. Does that make sense? Does that make sense?
So it's kind of like word of mouth. And what I think is that the industry is smaller than you think it is. It's a smaller world than you think it is.
Yeah.
So that word of mouth is extremely valuable.
It's very, very valuable. And this gets me perfectly into the next point that I was trying to make, which is dealing with clients. The first point I've written up there, if it goes back to the screen, is be someone that people like to work with. You know, word of mouth goes a long way. I've never advertised, but people talk about what it is that I do, and people listen to what I've done, and they want to be part of that conversation, you know. So yeah, word of mouth has a lot of sway, which means that, again, you've got to be not on your best behaviour, but you've got to be putting your best foot forward at all times, which brings us back to the original points of how you present yourself, how you approach people in professional conversations, how long it takes to return phone calls, how you answer emails, what your email address is. All those little things add up to the bigger picture of who you are, okay? The next little subject we've got here is dealing with clients. The single most difficult part of your business is also the most necessary. I'm going to read my notes first and then we'll go through my little points here. I regularly say that my job would be a lot easier if my clients would just leave me alone to do the job they're paying me for. There are a lot of times where the client gets in the way of the job that we have to do. I've got one client at the moment, and yeah, I could have had his job finished 3 months ago if it wasn't for the fact that he keeps on asking me to tweak things that don't really need work. But it doesn't always work that way. My single biggest skill, I think, is that people like working with me. And I can say that in a way that doesn't sound like I'm a big head. I'm a pretty easy to work with guy. But part of that is I listen to every single word the client says. And I try to incorporate or refer to what they're saying during the project. I make copious notes. I ask a zillion questions. All this builds a trust in a professional relationship that extends to the creative work. Be vigilant of what clients need. In all seriousness, I have great clients, but every once in a while, including recently, some are borderline impossible. You somehow still have to make that work. So developing your people skills is critically important in every creative discipline. Okay? So for me, somebody approaches me about producing their record or making their video, and I come straight back with about 10 questions. Very clear questions, all referring to what the end point is supposed to be, what we're going for, how are we going to do this, what are you looking for, you know, what sort of videos or what sort of record it is we're trying to make. And from that, I get the information that I need, and then I ask more questions. It's my job, and my production style is to get into the artist's head so I become an extension of them, so that I've asked so many questions, they don't really need to tell me very much. And we get into this really easy dialogue. Kylie, you've seen it happen a million times, where you know what the client wants. What's more to the point is there are a million ways to make a record or make a video or take a photo. What you're trying to do is actually reduce the amount of options that you've got so you can be focused on what it is that they're doing, that they want to do, that you want to achieve. So it comes back to the point that I made originally about being a good communicator. If you struggle to articulate, get better at it. Don't sit there and go, oh, I'm hopeless at writing emails. Get better at it. It's a skill that's as important as being able to hear the difference between 3K and 8K, or understanding different colour grading things or whatever, okay? So being able to communicate with clients is a very, very important thing, and it breeds confidence. If a client has confidence in you, then they're in. Like for me, once a client has had the conversation with me about making their record or their single, it's only a short leap to making their video and taking their photos and designing their single cover, which means I'm value adding. So what was going to be this amount of work is now that amount of work, all just because they've already told me the story, because I've communicated with them about that, okay? Developing your people skills is essential. So we keep on coming back to that point. Refine your professional practices, okay? I'm constantly thinking of ways, through experiences, of doing the same job more effectively. Not shortcuts. I'm not talking about making shortcuts or cutting down the job, just being more efficient. I'm the king of multitasking. Yesterday, I had the client didn't come in yesterday, so I was there and I had my console and my Pro Tools computer, but while that was doing something, I had my graphic design computer here and I was editing your photos in between things.
That's why I have to be nice to him today, still editing my photos.
Well, our photos. But at the same time, I've got a gig on Saturday night and I had a repertoire I needed to learn, so I was bouncing between these three things and taking phone calls as the day went on, and it was a great, exciting day that had its own momentum, but I wasn't taking shortcuts. I was just being super efficient, okay? Getting more done than what I should have just been doing in a day, okay? Work out what you can be doing while you're waiting for something else to happen. So in audio world, there's always something that has to bounce down or run out or whatever. Or in video world, there's something that has to render. While something's rendering, I'm researching this. So there's always ways you can do multiple things. And initially that can be a bit of a head trip, but you start to get into a rhythm of that where just doing one thing doesn't feel like enough. And I actually think that I'm better when I'm doing multiple things. I think I hear better when I'm not being completely focused on what I'm listening to. I tend to listen in a more, so when I'm mixing, for example, I listen in a more observant way when I'm not being super focused. So I'll go back and read something over here on this computer, or look at, you know, tidying up somebody's whatever, stray hairs or whatever, while I'm playing back the mix I'm currently working on, and then I go, oh wait, I need to go and fix up that thing that I just heard that I hadn't heard before. So you start to get into a workflow that can work really effectively like that. You'll start to see patterns in your work practices and start to timeline and plan ahead to use your time more efficiently. So for example, I've got stuff that I strictly can only do at the studio. And when I'm at the studio, I do that. By the same token, I know I've got stuff that I can do at home. So video stuff, I don't need to be at the studio to do. I can do that from my bed. I can do that from my lounge. I can do that at my girlfriend's place, you know. But I can't do guitar overdubs in any of those places because I'm not set up for that, especially because I've got a studio at home. So I start to kind of compartmentalise where and when I can work. And it makes me very, very productive. Like I said, assess your own performances to find ways of doing the same job more effectively. These are not shortcuts, they're just being efficient. Becoming an excellent multitasker is essential, and timeline and plan ahead to use all of your time more effectively. All right? The next thing I'm going to say, and people always make fun of me when I go on about this rant, make lists. You know, like, I'm not kidding. It says it, I'm not kidding. Make lists. These will save your life. I have daily lists. I have a daily list. Wait, where is it? Back here on my phone. I have a to-do list on my phone that I look at multiple times a day. It's just an app called Do, and you can't see it, but it's got a list of the things I need to address today. So I have that as my daily to-do list. Then I've got other notes in my phone that are longer-term project notes and longer-term plans. Every day I'm adding and looking at these documents so I'm aware of what needs to be done soon or later. It makes you incalculably more efficient. And ultimately, your time is worth something, as we keep on talking about. Start to implement these professional practices now while you're at uni. Assessments are just jobs with deadlines. If your career depends on the success of your if your career depended on the success of your week 9 assessment, you wouldn't leave it till week 8 to start it. I've started research and planning for jobs I won't be doing for 6 months. There's jobs I've got coming up. There's a gig that I've got coming up that isn't until April next year that is on my to-do list daily, that I chip away at what needs to be done. I'll do a little bit of work every day. So by the time it gets to January, most of the work that I need to do for that gig is done. I'm just refining, okay? But I'm looking very much in the long term, seeing that it's a big job, just broken down into a whole bunch of very, very little tasks. I have timelines mapped out for all of the upcoming work, all of it. It's a very successful approach and allows me to be alarmingly productive. So, lists. A lot of people swear by paper lists. I'm going to tell you they're not as efficient as your phone. We carry our phones with us everywhere, and the idea, for me, it's great. I can just be doing something unrelated and then something will pop into my head and I go and address it and add it to the list. And it'll be little things, you know, like things I have to buy for groceries. I've got a shopping list app that everybody should have. So as things come to me, I address it straight away. Not, I need to remember to put that thing on the list, because you will not remember. Our brains are too busy. Okay? So start to get into the habit of a pattern of lists on your phone. And implement this practice while you're at uni. I encourage you to start approaching your university studies with professional practices in mind. Okay? I think it's a really important way to get used to the idea of there's a deadline and I need to work towards it. Not I can put that off until the last minute, because in professional world that doesn't exist. I mean, sure, you get times when you have to cram for things, but in general, if people are paying you a large amount of money to make their records, they don't want you to cram it. They want you to give it love and attention and time. Okay, so start to get into the habit of doing that now while you're at uni. We've only got 5 more slides left. Are there any questions? We'll go on.
There is a question.
Great.
This is a question from Ali.
Hey, Ali.
As someone who has a startup production company, there's always a grey area of legalities I don't fully understand still. What's your advice for finding legal advisor in the creative industries? I mean, I found is it the Arts Law Centre? I found
Arts
that
Law
really
Centre
useful.
are your friend. Look, there's a lot of stuff that can be addressed by researching on the internet, but be careful with that, because everybody's got an opinion on the internet and there's no level of legality related to that. If there is murky areas in terms of legal things, sometimes you just need to invest in getting the right legal advice too. If you're a startup, then the Arts Law Centre should become your new best friend. Definitely, 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 because that's what it's set up to do. If you see yourself as being something that's going to grow and it's going to be an ongoing thing, it's really tricky, you know, like the whole idea of working out what you need to invest your money in. And somebody would go, investing money in a good lawyer isn't as much fun as buying a piece of equipment.
It's really not.
It's absolutely not, but it also gives you the information that you need to be able to walk out into the marketplace confidently knowing what your legal standpoint is. So there's been times when I've needed advice, and the best thing for me to do is just call my lawyer and just wear the $250 for the hour of advice, and just go in there with a bunch of questions and just get clarity on them. And that's ultimately been a really good investment. So you've got to look at that as just another resource. So that's what I would be doing. I'll be looking at the Arts Law Centre first, and then if you need to, and then I would probably say, for anybody that is in this kind of murky waters, start to ask around for who good legal representation is, and see whether they've got juniors in their office that can be part of, that would have a discounted rate or whatever, and just start to get a bit of a sense of who's out there in case you need them. Was there a follow-up question?
No, I was just thinking how the Arts Law Centre was a really great resource for study as well. There were lots of great articles, not necessarily to do with law all the time, particularly if you're studying music business management and things like that. It's really
true.
great. Yeah.
That's what I mean. I mean, even with the whole idea of kind of researching on the internet, you know when you're at a reputable, reference point. If you're going to some forums or just asking people on Facebook, it's probably not the best legal advice.
Yeah,
but going
you can't
to somewhere,
quote that.
there's usually some sort of precedent for most of the things that you're going to deal with. So if you use your search engines carefully, you can probably find enough advice to get you to the point where you've got clarity when you go and ask somebody for real advice. So you can go, okay, I know this, and I know this, and I know this. I was researching an issue this morning that I've been putting off for ages, thinking I need to go and see somebody, but I found all the information I needed just by digging a little bit deeper. And more importantly, the thing that I was looking for advice on today, a personal thing, it just took time. I just hadn't dedicated the time. I wanted a quick answer, when in actual fact I needed to spend 2 hours and just really find out what the answer was. And the answer was there. So keep on looking. And if you reach a dead end, that's when you start to reach out to lawyers and get clarity and get a real good answer. And then you can move forward with it with great confidence and knowing that that's what it is.
The link is in the comments as well. Someone was kind enough to put there.
Great, thank you. All right. Time management. As you can tell, I'm not doing a very good job of managing my time here because it's 3:48 already. This is a hard thing, setting boundaries. I regularly will work very, very late to get ahead of things. Be aware that your time is valuable. Learn to say no to things that have no long-term benefit. It's very difficult. But it is a skill I see professionals struggle with in all careers. So start practicing that now. So it's tricky. We all want to be helpful. I think that the creative community is made up of people who really do it for the love. If they didn't have to charge money for it, they wouldn't. That kind of makes us suckers a bit as well, where we are hesitant to ask people for money, or we go above and beyond quite regularly. And I'm not saying you shouldn't do that, but just be careful to not go above and beyond all the time by default. I have a tricky situation at the moment with somebody who I knew when I did a project for them last year was in a tough situation, so I went above and beyond. And now we've come back this year. They're still in a tough situation, but now they're asking me to go above and beyonder. And we just had a difficult email correspondence yesterday where I had to outline that this is what we should be doing, and we're now at this point, and how are we going to deal with it? And they're difficult things to navigate. But I don't blame them for that. I blame myself for that, because I let my goodwill go too far, which in a karmic point of view isn't a bad thing, but from a time management point of view isn't good, because you find yourself, when you're supposed to be playing with your kids on a Sunday afternoon, doing work that you're not really getting paid for, and you don't want to be doing that. But we will all find ourselves in that situation. Please don't be too hard on yourself. If you do find yourself in that situation, just try and learn from it, and don't do it all the time, I guess. If there's any consolation, like I said, most of my professional friends struggle with this. So start practicing it now. Start looking at things and going, there's little benefit for me to be going above and beyond with this thing, and put a ceiling on it, I guess. I hope that makes sense. It's a bit of a tricky one, but time management is a tricky thing. And for me, actually, one of the other things about time management that's difficult, I love my creative world. I love it. I love it so much. So it does tend to make boundaries difficult, especially from domestic situations, and that can be really, really tricky. So I'm getting better at compartmentalising things a little bit. But like I said, I've been doing it for a long time, and I still struggle with the compartmentalising of it, because I still have this genuine enthusiasm of, while my partner's watching something I'm not interested in, I'll just go over here and watch YouTube videos on Rickenbacker guitars or something like that. Have some boundaries, but it's not easy, okay? We're getting to the home stretch. Okay, some big motivational things to finish up, you creative professionals out there. Stay inspired, okay? It's easy to just get caught up in doing work gigs. If you only do that, you will burn out. I promise you will burn out. So I always have projects that I work on that don't make me money. But they fill my soul, as cliche as that sounds, and in the long run, add to my body of work or experience and skill set. They continue to fuel my passion for this world that we're diving into. So remember to have fun. I mean, a lot of the projects that Kylie and I have done that have now turned into bona fide, we've got a few albums under our belt kind of projects, were stuff that we kind of initially did for fun and to challenge ourselves. And then it was really good, and then we went, oh, we guess we should probably do this for real now. And then off we go. So I do balance things off. Like, the main reason that I have so many albums under my own name is because I'll have a day down in the studio and I'll just record something for no benefit. I know it's not making me any money, but I love it, and I'll try out some new techniques or use a different miking situation or mix things a different way, or I'll do the video a different way, or whatever, and it enriches me from a knowledge point of view and an experience point of view, but it also disconnects from the fact that my work is just dedicated to making money. I often say to people that if I won lotto, my life actually wouldn't change that much. I'd probably just be able to charge people a little bit less. But I probably wouldn't work much less because I like it. I like doing it. And I think that that's kind of the dream situation we want to be in. So yeah, look at the balance of that. And stay inspired. It's a really important thing, this whole idea of continuing to go back to the well, I guess, which brings me to my next point. Never stop being a fan. Constantly go back to the well to get re-inspired. Read, listen, watch, practice, study. Keep the fan in you alive, even on the hardest days. And there's a lot of days when you're going to be sitting there going, why am I even bothering to do this? Never forget the things that brought you right here in the first place, okay? So for me, by the side of my bed at home, there's a guitar, 2 books on guitars, a book on the Beatles, some inspirational quotes that somebody bought me at some point. And so every night before I go to bed, I put down my phone, I go and pick up one of these things and just go and reconnect with that part of who I am. And the next morning I wake up and I'm inspired to be in that world. Any opportunity I've got, like one of the greatest things about Facebook and Instagram feeds is that stuff will just pop up that you've never seen before, and all of a sudden you're an 11-year-old kid watching Lindsay Buckingham play guitar for Fleetwood Mac for the first time ever. So continue to be really inspired all the way through. And if ever you're feeling uninspired by what you're doing, stop the work you're doing. I've got a playlist on my Spotify and my Apple Music that is all-time favourite songs. And regularly, if I'm feeling a bit flat about my creative world, I'll just go for a walk and put that on. And by the time I come back, half of my problems are solved because I've just gotten re-inspired again. Are you running out of batteries? You can unplug my one if you want. My one's the bottom one. Sorry, technical talk here.
I'm just unplugging Michael.
We've only got a few pages left. Most importantly, say this again, be someone that people want to work with, okay? I think that of all the skills that I have, and I'm very lucky in the fact that I've got a pretty wide skill set, people think I'm a nice guy and they love the idea of walking into that room, into our room, that room you looked at before. They love it because it represents something to them. And a big part of that comes from me and what I've created, and over the last 10 years, with Kylie's help, what we've created in there, and the various assistants who've been in there who've just made their mark on that place as well. If you're someone that people want to work with, then you will have work, and they will recommend you. It's funny because in a lot of ways, I can trace my whole career back to probably my first 2 or 3 sessions that I did back in about 1992. You know, because they told somebody about what I did, and I stopped being just a cheap guy. I was a good guy who was easy to work with, who got great results. And then that grew and blossomed, and that just became the thing I was known for. The fact that I got good results on a good budget were almost a bonus to the fact that people had great experiences. So if you can be somebody that people have great experiences with, then you will find work. But you've got to work on that skill as well. You can't take that as a given, and you've got to be self-reflective. You've got to look at the things that you know you're not doing well and continue to refine, continue to get better at it. You know, take the feedback that people are giving you. You know, you mumble too much, or you speak too quickly, which is what I do. Or you don't answer my emails fast enough, or I never know how to contact you, things like that. Take that on board and get better at it. That's as important as learning how to do one of your actual skills better. I'm going to say one or two more things here, and then we're all done. This last one, be generous without expecting anything in return. I'm going to read you my little blurb here on this. This is a personal one. So forgive my immodesty, but I know I have a unique skill set. I know I do a whole bunch of stuff that not a lot of people do together. And I have the ability, sometimes, to do things that are very difficult easily. That's mainly because I've been doing it for a long time. Be aware of when you can genuinely help somebody. Not because of what you might get in return, but because we're humans and sometimes we need help. Don't wait for the karmic payback. It may not come, it usually doesn't. But the feeling of giving of yourself above and beyond what is required just because you can is a powerful one that can fuel and sustain you on the tough days. And having people think highly of you and respect not only the quality of your work, but your integrity isn't a bad thing to be putting out there in the world. Okay? So that's kind of a thing that I use as my mantra. There are times when people will put things across my desk where I know it's not going to take me a lot of time to do it, and it's not going to be very profitable, but it will change their outlook for the time to come. Do that job. Okay? It's a very, very important thing because it gives other creatives, it might be another songwriter, or it might be a singer, or somebody needs a mastering job, people who are on the fence for something, it gives them a leg up, and then off they go, and you've done it with goodwill, without any expectation of it coming back to you. But you've created something good in the world that didn't exist before. Sounds corny, but the amount of goodwill that generates for you and your brand and your business and yourself is something worth me mentioning in a lecture like this. Last point. There are a lot of big things that I've mentioned here today. Many of you will be thinking, I'm not good at accounting or networking or research or whatever. One of my favourite students caught me in the hallway out there one day and said, and I knew she was a great student. She said, what am I struggling with? You know, what have I got to do? And I said, you've got to be a better communicator. And this was like torture for this particular student. But the next week, she was a better communicator, and she went on to become a really, really successful person in the industry. So if you're not good at it, get better at it. Recognise the things you're not good at and just get better at them. If you recognise these things, so I'm not good at accounting or networking or researching or making lists, get over it. Get better at it. Get better at the things you're not good at, then you have no excuses. Then you can't look back on your career in 20 years' time and go, oh, if I had only been better at managing my money, I'd have been successful. That's not legitimate. If you can recognise that it's something that you're not good at, then change it at this early stage, and then you'll have real reasons to go forward, and you'll have no reason to look back and go, I would have been successful if I'd only addressed this thing. All right? So that's my big speech for the day. Any questions there?
There is, yes.
Let's go.
Let's go. So while we're answering this question, if you do have any questions, please pop them in. We'll try to get through them all. Okay, so this one, how do you know when to draw the line? I had a client that just pushed me around because I said I was happy to do the first project for free. They ended up pulling out and I got zilch. How do I know when to draw the line and make sure I keep that customer from being scared away?
Okay, great question. And I think it comes back down to the thing we mentioned earlier on, of setting up boundaries when you go into things. Even if you're going into, I'll do something for free projects, you know, make it clear, I'm doing this first one for free, and we'll see how it works out. If you do that one, they go, that was great, can we do another one? You'll go, sure, but the first one worked out pretty well, so I'm going to charge you $20 an hour for this one. It doesn't have to be a lot of money. Remember I said, charge for the first one, maybe charge for the keep the first one for free, maybe do the second one for free, but do it quicker, so you're not spending a lot of your valuable time. But then by the time you get to the third one, at the most, you should be charging something. So boundaries, setting up boundaries. And unfortunately, and I can say this because I've been screwed over a fair few times, more than enough times. Most of it is our fault by not setting up boundaries. Like I said, with my people who I've been working with recently, who I've gone above and beyonder for, the miscommunication was my fault. You know, I should have outlined very, very clearly what we were up for, and the miscommunication has left some residual ill will, but I've learned from it, and we're fixing it. And in your situation, whoever asks a question, you might need to put that down to, okay, that was an experience that I won't have again. Okay, so don't put yourself in that situation again.
Great.
Yep.
I don't think we have any more questions, but there is some staff. There are staff on the chat, so if you do have anything, they'll get to those questions for you.
Yep.
And look, if anything comes through, we can always get in contact with Michael.
Yeah,
He's
I'm
very
the
generous
easiest man in the
with
world to find, so feel free to just drop me a line, or drop me a line through JMC and they'll pass it on.
Absolutely. There was a slide in your show that had your contact details, didn't it? It had,
I think it did.
maybe just put that one up again, because it had all of those wonderful places that we could see your work.
Is it up there?
There we go.
There it is. I'm pretty easy to find through all of those things. So yeah, if you've got any questions related to this, for those people who are watching it back and not watching it in real time, feel free to drop me a line. If there's anything you need more clarity on, let me know.
Well, we've got a couple that snuck in at last minute. Do you always keep your personal creative time? Do you plan this in? Or have you any tips for protecting it? I sometimes feel I'm doing things for other people.
I have tended to find that there's a rhythm to things. Like when I'm busy with work, I don't schedule in personal creative time, but I know that if I get through that work in an efficient sort of time, there'll be a day that'll pop up, or a half a day. From my point of view, I've recognised the rhythm of things, that when I'm doing too much work, I do get quite frantic about just needing a day to just do my own things. If it's a really busy time, there's a certain celebration about being busy, because it means I can pay my rent without fear. So I do tend to book in a day. If it looks like it's going to be a long stretch of busy, then I'll book a day off. The day off very rarely is me sitting at home in front of Netflix. The day off is usually me getting to the studio at 9:15 and staying in the studio until a normal work day. But I'm not working on other people's stuff, or I might be working on their stuff in between things. So if it looks like you're having a prolonged busy period, absolutely book in a day or a couple of days, if you can afford it, for personal days. If you recognise that there is a bit of an ebb and flow to your kind of workflow, then just ride that out and just sneak in time. I mean, there are times when, you know, I'll finish a session, and rather than going home, I'll just have personal time at the studio. And often it's just me sitting in the studio, playing guitar, or just being in the space without the need to do client work.
Because it is our favourite place to be.
It is my favourite place in the world.
There's one. We might do one last question before we go. What would be the #1 indicator that brings success that you've seen in upcoming artists? And in contrast, what would be the single most occurring issue that artists deal with?
Great questions. Okay. The most successful artists are the ones who see the bigger picture of everything. And the one that has been the biggest downfall is people believing that their ability is enough. Okay, we've both got friends who are amazing singers and songwriters who think that that should be enough, but it's not. In today's world, it is not enough. It's kind of like when I was at school, there are brilliant students who, you know, the smart kids at school who didn't even really have to study to do really well, whereas I was kind of that second-tier student, or maybe the third-tier student, who had to work really, really hard to get results that were below them, and I always resented them. The most successful artists are the ones who are prepared to do work, who really do hard work. And I'm not talking about just singers and songwriters, I'm talking about video makers and, you know, manager people, songwriters. You know, like the most successful songwriter I know, she's writing every day. She's writing in person in Nashville during the day, and then at night she's doing collabs via Skype or FaceTime or Zoom or whatever. So she's just constantly doing that, and that's building up a muscle. So to directly answer your question, the most successful ones who are prepared to work hard on everything, So it's not just about being a good writer and a good singer or whatever. They're prepared to do the social media thing and looking at their photos and looking at their touring and learning new skills all the time. And the least successful ones are the ones who go, I'm really good, why aren't I famous? And really, there's a very clear line between those two. And there's all sorts of things in between. And I will say, the most successful ones, they're at the top of this heap. And then all of these people are all the ones who are not prepared to do that same amount of work. And it works for you creatives as well. So if you want to get good and give yourself a chance of being successful, the first thing you can do and the best thing you can do at this point of your career is just work harder than you think that you have to work. Certainly from my point of view, the students who have gone on from here to be most successful have been the ones who have recognised that early on in their career, and this course, this place, becomes an obsession. They're here in holidays, they're utilising the studios, they're utilising the video stuff, they're always looking for ways of utilising the resources here.
Great answer, great question.
Thank you.
All right, Michael. Well,
thanks, Kylie.
It's good to see you, as
Thank you.
always.
Thanks for having me.
Well, thank you so much for giving us your time since you are so busy.
It's a big week.
Yeah. So we really appreciate that. And thanks for everyone for joining us. Keep watching these JMC Masterclasses. We've loved bringing them to you, and it's a really great resource, and we hope you're enjoying them. So,
Okay. See you next time.
bye, everyone.